Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire is so popular, it never fails to have some sort of controversial opinion about it. In this video, I'm going to focus on the three most controversial opinions and hot takes on Game of Thrones Season 8 and Game of Thrones in general. Now, these are not necessarily my opinions, but I will be sharing my thoughts and opinions on these said hot takes. Before we get started, please do me a massive favor, and if you decide you enjoyed this video after watching it, slap a like on it, as a like goal is going to be 42 plus a 0. Also, this is the most important part. Make sure you're subscribed and then have your notifications turned on, so that way you'll get an alert every single time I drop a House of the Dragon or Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire video throughout this long night. Now, the first opinion that I want to mention, and I have shared my thoughts on Sansa before, is that basically a lot of people, or not a lot of people, a large chunk of the core book audience, as well as the show audience, thinks that Sansa deserves to be queen in the North, and she should have actually sat the Iron Throne, as what's happened to her character throughout the seasons, and what happens to her character in the books, and mainly on the TV show, the rape that she suffered from makes her journey all the more complex, and she struggled the most, and she suffered the most, and because she's gained intelligence, and she's so awesome, and she's so strong, she should have sat the Iron Throne, and her not getting that is all the more reason to hate Game of Thrones Season 8 and its ending. And my thoughts are that, well, before I say those, I want to preface this by saying that this channel is called Sir Hunt's Reviews. I'm in fact Sir Hunt's. I'm Mark, but this channel is all about my opinion. But the thing about YouTube is that there's this thing called a comment section. And if you disagree with my opinion, you can not only leave a dislike on this video, but you can also let me know your thoughts down below. And I'm not that big of a channel, so I read every single comment and try to respond to as many as I can. But just because you say, or you write it so that other characters say that another character is super smart, doesn't actually mean they're super smart. It just means that you wrote lines for people to think that, and you're trying to trick the average show watcher into thinking Sansa's this super intelligent character because she hung out with Littlefinger for a few seasons and was held captive in King's Landing by Cersei and the Lannisters. Well, maybe write some scenes and give Sansa some dialogue that would make me, who I think is a veteran show watcher and a bit book knowledgeable, just give me something to work with if you want to call her super smart. That's like, instead of writing compelling and intriguing and complex dialogue for Tyrion, they just kept having all the other characters say how smart Tyrion was, and he made some of the stupidest decisions. But it didn't work for me with Sansa. They could have had her in several scenes with Littlefinger towards the end of his demise, and maybe it could have played out a bit differently. I mean, Arya is technically responsible for killing Littlefinger with the help of Bran. Sansa kind of was just there. Now, I haven't seen Season 7 in a while, but I'm positive that that's the gist of how things turned out. And if you disagree, well, obviously let me know down below. But Sansa Stark is not a super intelligent character. And although she suffered from a fictional rape that didn't even happen in the books, that was super tragic. Insanely hard to watch, and it fucking sucks. Rape in real life is terrible. Anyone who has to deal with that, well, then obviously we all know that that's something that makes the person who survives a traumatic event like that a survivor. And not that many people can say that they're strong enough to do something like that. But this didn't happen to this didn't happen to Sansa in the books, and it really only happened in the show because they wanted to place Sansa in a position to have certain things handed to her throughout the plot. And if people didn't think she was well deserving of it, well, then you could just relate back to the rape scene that happened with Ramsay Bolton. All that aside, I do not think that Sansa Stark deserves to really even sit the Iron Throne. This is my opinion, of course, and I need to really, I guess, just express that her journey, as crazy as and as intense and as much that she suffered throughout the series, doesn't necessarily mean that she rightfully maneuvered herself into a position of power and deserves to take the throne in the North and deserved to take the throne in the South, the Iron Throne. No, it's not the case. It's not the case at all. She basically just existed and had so much shit handed to her, and obviously, yes, she suffered a lot, but it took her so long to sort of wake the fuck up. Remember, she would have still been dead if Theon hadn't have said, no, I'm gonna kill this person who's torturing you, and I'm gonna save us, basically. Like, what the fuck? I mean, so many other female characters that are strong leads were able to take their fates into their own hand. And, you know, I get bashed for saying, oh, well, she was a lady, and not everybody has to pick up a sword. Right, maybe in some places, but not in fucking Westeros, dude. Like, she's supposed to be a northerner. I understand that she is more like her mother in House Tully in those regards, but she is in fact blood of the wolf, and I wanted to see a little bit more from her character. Like, seriously, Arya handed her a knife, and she goes, what am I supposed to do with this? Shove it up your bum, dude. Come on, what do you think? stab somebody, cut some shit, kill someone, do something. Now, the next controversial opinion that I want to discuss kind of involves A Song of Ice and Fire, but mostly the television show, and it involves the Arthur of the story, George R. R. Martin, being racist. And the lack of casting of black people on Game of Thrones means that George R. R. Martin is racist, and the comments on his panel that he had recently where he was mispronouncing a few people's names and, you know, just saying things that I guess weren't as PC as shit needs to be nowadays. And my whole thoughts on all that are that George R. R. Martin is a plump, old, white guy from New Jersey. Like, from a long time ago. That's what the old means. When he's writing about, you know, A Song of Ice and Fire and all of his influences about things that, you know, he experienced being a white man from the 60s. Obviously, he's gonna write about the white experience throughout history in, you know, mostly Anglo-Saxon English history, which a lot of what the story is based on, the War of the Roses. There weren't a lot of black people around during that time that were in prominent roles. So instead of writing a bunch of slaves, which he did in the books, if you read, you know, there are some points to be made about how he describes certain characters from the Summer Islands and just people in general who are described as being black. He uses like certain symbolism that's like dark as night and ash as coal, and like so I guess you could make points to say that's a bit racist, but you got to realize that he's a white author. He's going to write about the white experience, and if you don't want that, well then don't read the fucking books and don't watch the show. Don't bitch about there being a lack of black people on the show. I feel like if it was forced, then I would be pissed off as being a black man watching this. Like, it doesn't make sense. Jacob Anderson, who is black, who plays Grey Worm on the show, is basically a slave without a dick. And then you've got the other guy, Salvador San, the pirate, the lustful man who wants to fuck the queen. Every single character that is pushed into this show has some sort of negative stereotype since they're given a black role. So I'm actually kind of glad that George chose to just leave that out, because we won't be forced to see that. On every single medium in television, every single kind of TV show, whether it's a drama, a comedy, or whatever. One of my favorite shows, The Office, is guilty of doing this. Every single time a black person is sort of forced to be in the cast when the show wasn't written about the black experience, the person is given some sort of demeaning fucking role. Every single black person in The Office has this as an example. Stanley, he's an overweight black man with diabetes and he cheats on his wife. What the fuck? If you don't know how to write about the black experience, just exclude it. Don't fucking give me some hogwash about what you think it's like to be black in America or black throughout history in general. If you don't know what you're writing about from experience or from having that own personal experience, then just don't do it. And that's what George R. R. Martin did. I think you could make the point that if you want to make any sort of dumbass point like this, which I don't know why you would, but, you know, it's a controversial opinion discussion video, but if you want to make a claim that something's racist, it could be the show. They left out several black characters who showed different aspects of what it might have been like for a black person back then. For instance, you had Strong Belwas. He was basically a tanned eunuch colossus. He comes from the fighting pits of Marine, and he was a former slave. But he claims to have never lost a fight, and every time he does get into a fight, he cuts his stomach, or he allows his opponent to cut his stomach one time, and then he just viciously and brutally murders them. And Dan and Dave chose to leave this character out. They would argue, obviously, for complexity's sake. They know that they already have a large cast anyway, and this is a television adaptation of a book series, so obviously certain characters have to get cut. But if you were to include a character like that, it would be another black person who would have been a strong lead and would have offered some much needed diversity to the cast and would have likely taken off some of the heat that they were getting. Now, the last most controversial Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire opinion that I want to discuss in this video is that Dan and Dave did nothing wrong, and it's George R. R. Martin's fault for not finishing the books. Now, I think very few people share that sentiment, but there are those out there. And I've actually expressed that some of the blame should be placed a little bit on George, because Dan and Dave were told that the books would be finished by the time they got there. But also, they fucked George over because they sped through his storyline, and he thought that they would put out a lot more seasons. So in all due fairness, it's sort of like up for debate on who's, you know, mostly to blame. I think that it's mostly Dan and Dave for not taking more time in writing the show and maybe just giving us a full last 2 seasons instead of, you know, leaving out 6 episodes. It would have felt more complete. But do I think that George is the one to blame for writing so slow, still not coming out with Winds of Winter nearly 11 years after A Dance with Dragon was released? Now, most people who are commenting every time George tweets something out and they're like, "Hey, I've been finished the books, man. We're waiting on the books," haven't likely even read the books or even really knows what the fuck are the differences between the show and the books themselves. Because once you start to realize the differences and once you open up these fucking pages and realize how complex this story is, you realize that it's going to take time. Clearly, George has changed a few things around, and in order to do that, I'm not saying he did it because of what happened on the show and the audience reactions. I'm just saying that he's a perfectionist and things like this take time. But since he's rewritten several chapters, it's going to be, you know, taking a little bit longer. And I've said this before in my more recent videos, and I'll say it again right here, right now. By the end of this year, by December, either Wins will already be out or we'll have a release date for it. Most of us are aware that George hasn't really updated us this much and this frequently as he has been these past few months. So to me, that means one thing. Winds of Winter is nearing release date, and I'm pretty sure we're all going to be having something to hold us over until House of the Dragon premieres in 2022. Alright, I want to thank you all so much for watching. If you could please slap a like on this video, as the like goal is going to be 42, add a 0. Also, make sure you're subscribed and make sure you have your notifications turned on, so that way you'll get an alert every single time I drop a Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire, and House of the Dragon video throughout this long night. Super special shout out to every single member of my Patreon family, and if you are watching and interested in joining, check out the link down below or one of the links that's popped off during this video. My name's Mark, and super special shout out and thank you to every single person watching this video. This has been Sir Hunt's Reviews.